Welcome back to the Next Aid Station podcast. I'm your host, Jake Kilgore. Today, super excited to have in friend and ultra runner Trevor Fuchs. Trevor, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
All right, buddy. Trevor, the introvert. We're going to have really opening up today and talking about his trail running life, his experience. I've trail ran with you. Mm-hmm. We've been in several races together, although I consider them runs while you're actually racing for the podium. So
that's maybe not the ones we've run together, but yeah.
Yeah, the ones we run together have not really suited us or ended well for either one of us, to be honest.
All right.
So Trevor, a long tenured athlete and runner. He's pretty much a lock, in my opinion, to podium most of the time you toe the line. And I think you kind of first came on the running scene, from what I remember, was about 2016 and 17 when you went back-to-back and won the Wasatch 100 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. Backing up just before that, when did you get into running? How did you start trail running and why? You're now in your mid-40s.
Yeah.
And that's been about 10 years competing on the trails.
Yeah. I guess it started growing up. My dad was a marathon runner. We grew up in Boulder, Colorado, so it definitely wasn't foreign to me to run and everything. Got a lot more into other things when I was, in high school, music and stuff like that, different sports, played hockey. So I didn't really run again until I was about 30, I think. At that point, I'd been smoking at least a pack of cigarettes a day for 10 years probably, and drinking heavily, and just was out of shape, wanted to do something to try to make it so I didn't hack up a lung going upstairs and stuff, so started hiking with a friend, and that's turned into hiking up hills and running down hills, and then realized pretty quickly that I am, sort of a natural runner, like long legs and just sort of naturally talented at it. And signed up for a 5K like a week or two after we started running, and I ended up winning for my age group. So I was like, all right, maybe I got something. 'Cause, like, looking back now, like, that's no training, a week, so that was basically just from couch to 5K. And so started running from there, ran a few races, realized I didn't really care for it too much. Like, I'm just not a competitive person in general. And I was kind of going through a rocky part of my marriage at the time. And so stopped racing and just sort of went out and ran a little bit here and there, and then ended up getting a divorce. And then that's when I, sort of lost my mind a little bit, I guess, is what I, felt like what was going on, and just started running for 5-6 hours at a time. I didn't know it was a thing. Like, I barely knew what ultra running was. I think I'd read Born to Run, a few years before that or whatever, but never really thought it was something I was going to do. And then one day I had ran like 40 miles just sort of on accident. I think I just kept getting lost, sort of thing, and eventually came back, and I told a friend, and they were like, you should sign up for Wasatch 100. And I was like, okay, maybe I will. So I went back and looked it up, and like, it was pretty serendipitous, because the deadline to postmark, back then you had to mail in like a check with your application, and the deadline to have it postmarked was the next day. So I was like, screw it, and I just did it. And then, of course, I didn't think I'd get in. And then, of course, I did. So
What year was that?
That was 2014.
And that was the first time you ran Wasatch. So in 2014, I wasn't trail running yet. I just started really road running in that year. So I had no idea what really Wasatch was, even though it's in my backyard, kind of like you. But I didn't know you were mailing in an application and a check just 9 years ago.
Yeah. I think even, I don't know, they changed it maybe 6 or 7, like 6 years ago.
I think they just changed it last year.
It's pretty recent. They got on ultra sign up. It wasn't that long ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was the first time you ran it, 2014, and it was only 2 years later you won it.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So I ran it in 2014. I had the intention to go sub 24. No idea what I was doing. I just thought that was like, you get the cool cougar belt buckle or whatever. So I was like, or cheetah, that's what it is. And I was like, that sounds like a good goal. So I went for that, and made every mistake you could possibly think of. Hardly drank any water, hardly ate any food.
Went out too hard. Didn't drink enough water, didn't eat food.
I went out way too easy because,
Okay.
you know, my only experience or knowing anything about running 100 milers was from what I'd read like 6 years ago before that in Born to Run. And I remember them talking about hiking up hills. So I was like, hey, I'm going to hike up this hill, and just hiking with people and way in a conga line, you know, way back in a conga line. And at some point I was just like, this seems really slow. Like I can run this, you know? So I started running and went from there. Got to Lamb's Canyon aid station, and they used to weigh you back then too. So they'd weigh you before the race, the day before, and then they'd weigh you at like 3 or 4 aid stations. And I had lost 9 pounds in sweat. And so if I'd lost 1 more pound, they would have just had me drop right there.
That was the rule. They
Yeah,
would weigh
10
you.
pounds.
If you lose 10 pounds during the
you're out.
race, and for those listening, Lambs Canyon's like mile 45.
Yeah, it might
Give
have
or
been
take.
closer to 50 back then.
Yeah.
After course changes and stuff. Anyway, so I sat down and I drank like 6 gallons of water and then just carried on, had a pacer from there. Then took a wrong turn at mile 80. I was like well on pace for like 22 hours or something, 22 and a half maybe. Took a wrong turn, went like 2 miles off course, and then had to backtrack, and it was like straight uphill, of course, you know. Then made it like, got back on course and then just sprinted as fast as I could to try to get under the 24, and I made it. Then had no desire to do it again. I was like, cool, I did it. It's fine. Was having a kid with my now wife, and just thought I'd like take some time off with the family and everything, and didn't do much in 2015 at all. And then I signed up again in 2016, just as like, been long enough that the trauma had worn off, I guess.
Yeah, you've forgotten how painful it was.
Yeah, exactly. So did it again. And I think at one point, I think what happened is I'd paced somebody in 2015, somebody that came in from Boulder that I knew, sort of an acquaintance. And I paced him, and he asked if I was going to run it again. I was like, yeah, maybe. And he's like, how do you want to do? And I was like, I think I want to win it. And just kind of like blurted it out, you know? And then I was like, okay, maybe that is a goal, you know? And then I just went from there. That just like stuck in my head as a goal. Like, I'm going to win Wasatch. And so
That's unreal.
I trained my ass off. And
Yeah. Was that a lottery in 2014, 2016?
yeah.
It was still a lottery,
Yeah.
but you still got in. So you got in, you won it. What was that like, winning the Wasatch 100? Did you know how big that race was when you won it?
No, I mean, I don't know that it's even that big still. I didn't really know. I just,
Hey man, don't be downplaying it. I think you have much more experience in the sport than I do, but if I'm going to pick top 10 for sure, potentially top 5, like best 100 milers or biggest, longest running, most competitive 100 milers in the country, right? Nationally or worldwide, no, but in the country, right?
yeah.
Western and Hard Rock and Leadville. I mean, Wasatch is somewhere in that range. So
Yeah,
to
for
me,
sure.
Wasatch is one of them. Of the hundreds I've done, a handful of them, it's up there as far as one of the toughest, and it sells out as a lottery every year. I think it's a huge deal to win that race.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I didn't really know. Like, the funny thing about that race is when you finish it at 1 a.m, or whatever it is, when you win it, you're basically like, your family's there, maybe. I think my wife was there, kids were asleep, and the race director was there, and that's about it, you know? So, like, it doesn't feel like anything.
It's not UTMB.
It's kind of underwhelming. Let's just say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you go to the finish line UTMB or Western, and it's
Yeah.
a stadium or an entire road is filled with thousands of fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is unique that way. I think some of the local races most races are that way.
They are, yeah, for sure.
You finish the race, you look around, you're like, all right, cool. You grab a buckle and you go home.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're finishing at 2 or 3 in the morning, like people aren't super stoked to be out in the middle of the woods cheering people on at that point, you know. So.
Yeah. So then you at that point, did you kind of make the conscious decision, or was it before that race to say, I'm going to really put time into this, build a schedule, get a coach, watch my nutrition, and like really lock in?
It was definitely after that, and I sort of had some injuries after that 2016 race. Had a lot of knee issues and things like that, and I'd, heard a lot of podcasts with coaches and stuff on them, and I was like, maybe I should look into that. And that's kind of when I started to get dialed in. I was like, if I can, if I can win that race without a coach and just kind of on my own will, on a whim, really, in a way,
Yeah.
maybe it'd be interesting to see what I can do with a coach and just more focused and everything. So
Yeah. And then a few years later, you were battling first and second place at the Hurt 100 in Hawaii. You ended up winning that in 2020, the Hurt 100. And then, most recently, let me see, but the year before that, you won the Ute 100, right? Ute 100, Hurt 100. So you've got your fair share of wins and a lot of podiums. How do you feel you're competing today as you've endured some injuries? You've gotten a little older. I remember seeing something on one of your most recent posts where you're like, these young bucks, man, they're just coming in fast and hot. How do you feel? How do you feel you're aging as an endurance athlete?
I'm going to find out in a couple weeks at a race, probably. The last couple years, I've been dealing with some sort of like metabolic issue. I don't want to go too deep in the weeds on it, but so I've been struggling with running quite a bit for the last year and a half, 2 years, and just felt like maybe I'm getting old, but I think it was more of a health thing than anything, because I'm starting to come out of that and feel a lot better. But there's definitely some age stuff going on. I mean, things hurt way more than they used to, I'm almost 42, and like pretty sure somewhere between 38 and 42, something happens where you just start injuring yourself in your sleep, like you go to bed and you wake up and you're like, oh,
I didn't feel that the day before.
Yeah, I have no idea how I.
Yeah, so so you're definitely not in your mid 40s as I presented you. Early 40s, man. You got to correct me.
Okay, well, yeah, it's close
You're
to
41.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be 42 in a few weeks. But.
Okay, but you have the Cascade Crest up in the great state of Washington.
Yeah.
Next week, the 21st.
21st, yeah.
So probably about the time people are listening to this, you'll be racing. Tell us about that race, what you're looking forward to. You've never done it before. Where is it? What's the course like?
Yeah, so I have this bad habit of not doing any course recon until like the day before. My wife could probably tell you everything about it, like every turn and
I know
the
she
course.
can. Yeah.
She's a planner. But yeah, I don't know a ton about it other than the general area up in the Cascades, and I've seen photos. It looks beautiful. I've always wanted to travel up there, so put my name in for the lottery and got in.
And that's a Hard Rock qualifier, I believe.
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I believe you'll do really well in that race. So last year you did Hard Rock in July. Was that last year? Hard Rock and then Wasatch?
It was 2 years ago.
2 years ago, Hard Rock, then
yeah.
Wasatch. This year you're doing Cascade Crest and then the Bear, which you've done before, right? Tell me your experience. This is kind of Hard Rock 100 week for ultra runners around the world. Tell me about your experience at Hard Rock 2 years ago.
Beautiful, hard, challenging. I mean, the race itself, just the community around it and everything was overwhelmingly awesome and positive. It's the type of place you go to and you're just like, I need to be involved in this every year. Whether I get in, whether I don't get in, whether I'm even pacing or crewing anybody, I need to come here and just spectate or whatever. The area is just awesome and filled with cool history. The race itself is really hard. I mean, it's
33,000 feet.
33,000 feet of climbing, and it's all up. You're up above 12,000 feet most of the day. Go up to 14,000 or close to.
Yeah.
So it wears on you, and I think it's one of those races where you really have to dial in your training specifically to that. You got to do a ton of vert, preferably up high. Like if you can get up to 12,000 feet, that would be ideal. I didn't spend enough time at altitude, and that really took its toll on me. I always thought I was good at altitude, but 12,000 feet hits different when you're up there all day.
It's a lot different than where
pushing yourself.
We train at 6, 7, 8,000 feet, typically around here. Big difference, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So you finished in the top 10, which is huge and in one of the biggest races in the world, in my opinion, for for hundreds and vert and climbing. You get a ton of Europeans that come over to it, setting course records, right? What would you do differently, or what advice would you have for those running that race?
The biggest thing I would do differently would just be do everything I can to get out there 2 or 3 weeks earlier and just spend a lot of time there. Did some questionable life things leading up to it, which I'm doing again right now leading up to a race, which was move. And you don't think about how stressful things like that can be until you're, 50 miles deep in one of the hardest races in the world, right? And you're just like, why are my legs not working? Like, why do I feel so run down? And it's like, oh, because I've been packing beds upstairs and stuff for the last week or whatever. Like I've got like stress hives going on right now on my neck. We just bought a house, and like I don't even think about how stressful that is until you're like signing closing documents and stuff, and you're just like, oh, that sucked. And then you're like, well, now I gotta spend a month fixing up the house, and then we have 3 weeks to move.
And that all kind of weighs on you going into race week.
That's my general advice for anybody. Like, try not to move in the couple 2 or 3 weeks before a race, preferably if you can help it, or just do eliminate stress if you can. Try to relax, take it easy on yourself. Especially races like that, you're going to need every ounce of energy you have for sure. So
yeah. So you moved, because I think you moved into, maybe you moved downtown. You moved from Ogden to Salt Lake, right?
Yeah.
But now you were going to move to Hawaii.
Still planning on doing that eventually. Yeah, taking a bit of a break from the whole idea. We bought some land there, and we're going to build a house, and things kind of took a turn financially with interest rates and things like that. So decided we're going to stick around until my oldest graduates high school.
Oh, cool.
So another 3 years, and then we'll look back at doing that. So
look back and get out to Hawaii a little bit later.
Hopefully,
So you bought a house, you moved, you're here to stay.
Yeah, we're not moved yet. We're in the fixing it up phase now. So
all right, man. Yeah. Hey, I think that's awesome. We've had race director and Cody Draper and Preston Wood, big bear guys, buddies of ours. We've ran with them. You have certainly as well. When was the last time you ran the Bear 100?
It's 2019.
And so why did you decide to come back 4 years later?
Well, when I ran it in 2019, I'd had some sort of respiratory issue going on, like for a few weeks leading up to it. So I just wasn't 100% at the race. So I've always told myself I was going to go back, but it's just never worked out timing wise. So this year it seemed like it was going to work out pretty good. So I'm excited to go back and see how I can do. Hopefully shave some time off. But
yeah, now you've had some respiratory concerns and health throughout your running career.
Yeah.
Is that due to the packs of smokes in the 30s or what?
I can only assume. I've also had like allergies that I never knew existed until I finally got that stuff tested, and some acid reflux issues that were causing issues with my throat, like closing up, especially if I was breathing bad air and things like that. Any sort of irritant would make it get inflamed. Things seem to be a little better now, but that's part of the reason we want to move to Hawaii is just a little cleaner air out there.
Well,
it could be tough here.
Yeah. So. Well, I remember the first I'd heard of it was when in 2020 when you and I raced I'm Tough up in Idaho.
Yeah.
And you were in the lead pack of the lead group, and I came up to mile 50 and you had dropped out.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying you had respiratory issues. I thought it was just because of the smoke in the air. Huge fires in Oregon that had come over, and it just smothered McCall, Idaho, and Boise. And I mean, those levels of smoke were like unprecedented. I remember
it was crazy.
Doctors in the area and people at aid stations that were like, this race should be canceled because of the health hazard to runners' lungs. What do you recall from that day, from that race?
I mean, that's really why I dropped, to be honest. It was more preventative than anything because I know I have issues. Started to feel a little crappy during the race, but it wasn't anything I couldn't work through on a normal day. But I'd honestly told myself the day before, if we woke up and the AQI was over 100, I just wasn't going to race. But when we woke up, it was like 75, 80 or something. So I was like, all right, let's do it. And then as the day progressed, it just got worse and worse to the point where you couldn't see anything. And, as soon as that happened, I was just like, it's just not worth it. Like, it's during COVID times too, and you're traveling, and it's like, what if I get that on top of inhaling all this, all these toxic particles? So it just wasn't worth the risk to me at the time. So
yeah, and I don't think I really realized it until then when I came up on that aid station. You were dropping for preventative, and I kind of looked around and was like, oh yeah, it's 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I've been running for 12 hours, give or take.
Yeah.
But that night was like gnarly.
Yeah.
My throat was just drying up. The visibility was really bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you couldn't drink enough water to get the smoke out.
Yeah.
And then as the sun rose, the visibility was terrible. Like, it came in that night of the race. So race director wise, as I've kind of learned as a race director, like, hindsight's 20/20, but like, there's no way you would have not started that race.
Right.
Because like you said, it was 75, AQI was 75 when the race started. And then the night of the race, it happened to get bad, but what are you going to do at that point?
Yeah. There's not much you can do, but let everyone make their own decisions about it, which is what we did. So, and like the other thing is, like you said, the poor visibility. Like, even during the day, you couldn't see a lot. Like, it was just so smoky. So you're not really having fun, and like, my whole thing about this is like, I want to have fun. And if I'm out there and it's just like, this sucks the whole time, like, why do it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I remember you dropped. That was only the second 100 I'd ever done. The longest I've been out there. That one took me 30 hours, and it ended up running 108 miles.
Yeah.
So tack on 8 miles and the smoke and the heat. It was hot that year.
It was way hot. Yeah.
Way hot. And so that was rough. But then we ended up racing again together and in Hawaii, and we both DNF'd that one. And then we raced Wasatch together, and I dropped that one. So you're right. We have not had the best of luck racing together, man.
Yeah, we should avoid it probably in the future.
I will look at your count. We'll sync up every winter to make sure we're alternating races.
That's a good idea.
That's a great idea. So tell me, let's back up a little bit more to kind of how the running and like the addiction part of like the drinking and smoking. Like, how has running helped you stay on course and like kind of lead the path you want to lead as a husband and a father and an individual?
That's a good question. I think I had made the commitment to be healthy before I had made the commitment to like really get addicted to running, I guess, or it didn't really like fill any sort of void. Like, I'd already eliminated that from my addiction, I guess. But I think that just being motivated to constantly get better has forced other things in my life to like stay more focused, like as far as my diet goes and the way I eat. I don't drink on weekdays now. Like, I'll only have a drink or two on the weekends if I've run like 30 miles or whatever. Not that like I feel like you need to earn it or anything, but it's just I try to avoid it during the week so that I'm not affecting my workouts and things like that. I think it's funny because running these things takes so much time away from your family, right? Which I always feel guilty about. If a Saturday I have to go run for 6 hours in the morning or whatever, and I feel like I'm missing out on certain things with my kids' lives. But I also feel like if I am not doing it, then I'm not able to stay as present with them when I do have time with them. I'm thinking about other things. I'm stressed out. I have anxiety and things like that. I go for a run, all that stuff sort of gets washed away, and I'm able just to like listen to them, listen to their problems, and not just be so focused on myself. That's kind of been the biggest thing for me. Is it's just a very therapeutic thing that we do. And I think that's what's allowed me to stay so focused through it for the last 10 years and have the desire to keep training, even through the periods like a year and a half where I just feel terrible, feel like I shouldn't be running, but I still I get out anyways because I need it, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the therapeutic relationship to ultra running, the trails, being in the mountains. It's been a huge part of my therapy, anxiety, really just getting out there, locking in the music or not, putting, I purposely don't run with a phone because I can't get away from the texts and the calls and the emails. And I feel like in today's society, I don't think enough people get away from that as often as they should. And I'm not saying everyone needs to go for a 6-hour run, but 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, several times a week, I have found to be so incredibly healthy mentally and emotionally, obviously physically. And I think you touch on that. It's interesting because as ultra athletes, endurance athletes, whether it's biking, swimming, running, as an endurance athlete, you got to put in the time to perform and to hit your standards and like your goals. And we all have things we want to achieve, but that's so hard to balance. The work life training balance. It's interesting that you have that perspective on it. I love that. I love that perspective, is that when I do run and when I do have that time for myself to go out and hit the trails, I actually find that I'm a better partner or a better father. I'm more attentive. I'm actually present with them. When did you realize that? Like, when did that come to fruition, that like I'm not taking time away from them, I'm actually becoming a better father and husband when I'm there because of it?
I don't know. Maybe we should ask them, to be honest with you. Hopefully they agree with me.
Your wife's like, that's bullcrap, dude.
I think it's more just like you notice it on a day-to-day basis too. Like the other day, decided that I was going to run in the evening and I was going to go out during the day, spend some time with the family, and then we're going to go to the new house and work on some things. And I remember I was just like uptight the whole time. Things were driving me crazy, stressing me out. I was probably stressing my wife out with my anxiety about certain things on the house. And then finally it was just like, okay, it's 6:30. I got to go now or I'm not going to get it done. So I get out, I go for a run, I come home, and I was just like, what the hell was I stressed out about? Like, what was that? It's just things like that. You realize like you get home from a run and it's just like nothing matters anymore. Your kid's running around screaming. Like maybe before you went for your run, you'd just be like, shut up. We need some quiet in the house, please, for a minute. But you get home from a 4-hour run and, they could throw toy cars at your head and you don't care. It's just like,
it doesn't bother you.
It doesn't matter.
You kind of got that out.
Yeah.
You left it on the trail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there, shifting gears slightly, because I'm kind of scrolling through your experience as an athlete. A couple of weeks ago was Western States.
Mm-hmm.
You raced Western States last year. First time?
First time, yeah.
And I remember you were not super thrilled with your performance, if I remember right. Talking to you after the race, and I remember when I dropped out of Wasatch, it was like the first time I ever DNF'd.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget your text message to me, which I'll summarize as essentially like, in the sport, the way we treat the DNF, and whether it's looked down upon or as a failure, or it's, hey man, like I wasn't feeling my best and I'm going to live. I remember you saying, live to fight another day.
Yeah.
And when I got your text, I immediately like accepted the wait list for the Bear, which was 2 weeks later, and I had one of the best races ever.
Yeah.
So as an experienced athlete, how do you look at DNF between failure and like, no, I'm going to live to fight another day. It's fine. It's part of the sport. How do you balance that?
Well, for one, I think what we're doing is hard enough. Running 100 miles it's kind of dumb, and there's not a whole lot of point to it when you really think about it. Like internally, yes, there is. Like we're trying to explore our limits and figure out what we can do. But from an outside perspective, people that are seeing what we're doing, they're just like, I don't even like to drive that far, you know? Like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter. And so we're doing these things, and like we're training for months and months to get to this race and to do this. And then like that's the most important part, right? The 3 months leading up to the race, you've already done what you needed to do. You've already found your limit, you know, like you've explored how you can fit these things into your life, waking up at 4 a.m. so you can get in a 3-hour run before you have to go to work for 8 hours and then come home with the family and then go run a double in the evening. Like you've already put in the hard work. The race is just the fun part. It's not exploring who we are, you know? I mean, to an extent it is, but like, I think that as a culture, like we've decided that if you drop from a race, you quit, right? It's not always that simple, that cut and dry. Like we just talked about a few of mine. Like I didn't think it was worth having pneumonia for 3 months after a race. Like, did I quit or did I make a smart decision? Like, you know, at Hurt 100 that one year, like my body just wasn't where it needed to be to run 100 miles. And I was already in Hawaii, so I started because you never know how you're going to feel. And I just never ended up feeling that special way that you kind of need to feel at some point to know like, hey, I've got this today. So I stopped that one. I'd rather hang out on the beach with my family in Hawaii, you know, than suffer for 20 hours. I think it's just all about finding what's more important to you that day. Is the suffer what you need? Is that like what you need in your life to figure out what's important to you and like to sort through everything, all the demons in your head or whatever? Do you need that? Or like, do you need to go spend 6 hours on the beach with your kids? Like sometimes it's a pretty easy choice, you know? And I think we just face a lot of pressure that we don't really need to. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves, but like there's a lot of made up pressure just in the community that, you know, we need to, I don't know. DNFing is just demonized. I don't think it needs to be. Like sometimes it's just not worth it.
That is the word you used in the text to me, demonized. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. And whether you have to DNF because of injury, you know, Hayden Hawks, right? The Western states, like I know everyone around here, even like nationally, a lot of people were rooting for him. He was absolutely a contended runner on anyone's podcast, reading anywhere that he was going to podium at minimum, right? Like he was there. And unfortunately the injury, you know, snapped him and he had to bail. And I think that's, you know, whether it's that or it's preventative where you have this smoke thing, or, you know, you just aren't feeling it. And it just, everything just hurts. You're moving slow. This isn't worth it. I'm going to live to fight another day. And I think that the more experience that we have as athletes and the more races we finish and the more races that we DNF, only we can decide and understand where that limit lies on that specific day.
For sure. And so Western states, I had no business starting that race. I was still dealing with those health issues. Like I knew I wasn't going to be competing. Like I wasn't going into it thinking, you know, I bet I can top 10 this thing. Like that was never in question for me. But I've been trying to get into that race for 10 years or whatever, you know, and people have been trying to get into that race for 10 plus years. And if I took all that time up to the day before to decide that, you know what, my body's just not there, and then somebody doesn't get in because of that, it's just not really fair, you know? And so I wasn't going to drop out at mile 30 of that race. I wasn't going to drop out at mile 60 that race because that one like really meant something, you know? And only we know that, you know, like some races I've run it 3 times. Like I don't need to finish it. I've already proven that I can, you know, but that one I needed for sure. And it wasn't that I was unhappy with my time or my performance, because only I kind of knew what I'd been going through for the year and a half leading up to that, or the year at that point. And, you know, I maybe given hints and told people how I'd been feeling, but no one knows pain unless you feel it. You know what I'm saying? So like people could say, yeah, he's been having a rough time, but on the surface, I looked fine, you know?
Well, for 90% of ultra athletes,
Yeah.
you're doing great, right? They look at your time, wow, 21 hours and finish top whatever. Anyone else would look at that and be like, yeah, he's a phenomenal runner, which you are. But to your standards, you knew what you were getting. You know, you knew where your body was at when you towed the line. But that race meant so much to you that you're like, I'm going to enjoy the day. I'm going to finish the course. This is a beautiful course in Northern California, and I'm not competing for top 10.
Yeah. And as somebody who's been like competitive or podiumed races before, it's a hard thing to come to grips with, and like you feel like you have to explain it to people. That's the hardest part. Is like you feel like you have to explain your performance, like, you know, why you didn't have a 16-hour day or whatever. Like, but I don't know.
Yeah. I get it because you know, at lower levels than that, I understand it. And I would not relate or understand unless I had DNF'd races. So I towed the line at my first 100 in 2019, the Wasatch.
Yeah.
And I didn't, kind of like you, first time ever done 100, I didn't really know. I just went and finished it, did great. To this day, I don't think I realized how well I actually did. For me, like that was great. The next time I towed the line of that race was the year you were in it, and went out too hard, changed my plan. I would try some different things, completely wrecked my quads early in that race. And by the time I got to mile 35, 32 at Big Mountain, I was like, I'm wrecked. And I walked 8 miles and then dropped.
Yeah.
And only I knew like, okay, you know, I've finished the race before. I don't need to prove anything at this race. I don't feel good. Like, I can't walk downhill. It hurts so bad. And the Hurt 100, you know, same thing. So for me, I don't need to prove anything at Wasatch again, but internally, like, I feel like I have unfinished business at the Hurt 100. I truly feel that way because I've never finished it. And I feel like now I understand it, and I get that there's 5 loops and it's climbing and it's humid and it's rooty and rocky and slippery mud. For you, do you feel like you have unfinished business at Western States, or is there another race in your history where like, I've got to go back and clear that one?
I don't think so. No. Like, I'd love to go back to Western, right? But I'm also grappling with this fear. Am I too old? You know, am I too old to top 10? I might be. Some of these guys running an hour so fast, you know, and ladies too.
Yeah.
Courtney, insane. So I, you know, there's a level of self-doubt that like, I don't know that I can do a lot better than, I'm sure I can. I'm sure I can do better than 21 hours, but I don't know how much, you know.
I know for a fact you can do better, but I like that you're content and you're happy with it. And hey, like, you know, I don't feel like I got anything to go prove. I'm going to try other races. So my mantra for the last couple of years has been much of like balancing work, life, family, and running. And so for me, it's been, if I'm going to continue running, which I want to continue doing, I want to do new races. I don't want to go do stuff I've already done because the window of opportunity is narrow. It's small. It's a short window, and so I want to hit different races, and I want to travel just a little bit. You know, nothing crazy. Go to a new state, new city, and race something new. What do you foresee in the next few years? Is it that type of thing? Like, I want to try new races, or do I want to go back to races like Wasatch, and I want to like, I know I can do better. I'm going to go knock out a better time.
I have a little bit of both, I think. Like, and maybe it's something I try to do one of each every year, or I don't know. Maybe I don't do any some years. I don't know. As I get older, I'm starting to find joy in other things. Like, I've been coaching, and I find that to be as rewarding, if not more rewarding, than running my own races. I've been enjoying that a lot, and you know, I've got this race coming up in 2 weeks, and I can't say that I'm like as pumped up as I would have been 5 years ago. Like, I'm excited to run it, I think, you know. I think I am. So I don't know. Like, when I first started racing, like, I didn't plan anything. It was just kind of like, hey, I'd throw my name in lotteries and whatever, and if I get into something, then I'll show up and do it. And I think that's kind of, to an extent, been the way I've operated this entire time. But maybe for a few years, I felt like I forced things in. And yeah, there's just so much in life, you know, work, family, got 3 kids. They're getting older, starting to have their own things that they need to do and that I need to be present for. So like, racing is just slowly becoming less and less of a priority for me. I don't feel like I need to fit it, like force it in. But if I get in via a lottery for something, a race that sounds super cool, then I'll do it. But I don't think I need to prove anything.
No, anyone that looks up your resume, I think you're well proven.
I mean, if you asked me 2 years ago, I would have felt like I needed to prove myself. Like, I want a top 5 at Western. I want a top 3 at Hard Rock at least, you know, but it's just not that important. I don't know.
It's changing. Yeah. The mindset's changing as you get older and have other priorities and family and things. I think that's a great transformation that we all go through, and it kind of hits you everyone at different times, depending on your age and your health and what else is going on in your life. I think you've done a phenomenal job balancing that and just taking it 1 year at a time with your health or with your family and moving and career change and different things like that. I think you've done a phenomenal job. How closely do you follow the sport, like other athletes and other races? Are you like locked in every weekend like some of these other guys?
Not at all.
So do you?
I don't follow it. Like, a little bit. Like, I look at results occasionally, and big races I'll sort of like follow along on Twitter. But
so like for Hard Rock this week, do you have favorites? Who do you like?
I don't know who's running it. I don't know who's running it.
So like, you don't follow up that close.
Honestly, I know of friends and acquaintances who are running it, but I don't know the star list at all.
A couple guys from Utah that we know of, and
and I'm excited for them for sure, and I'm gonna follow along, but I don't know. This has been like a huge topic of conversation a lot, especially in like the podcast space, the running podcast space, and how to grow the sport, and like we're doing all these like live streams and stuff now, but like to be honest, I kind of find the sport a little boring.
Even as an elite athlete.
I love to do it. I love to run it, but like, I mean, some of these races you're talking 14 to 30 hours or whatever. Like, I'm going to run twice in that time myself on my own and like do all these things. Like, I don't really have time to watch a 30-hour sporting event, you know, like I can barely watch a full basketball game. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's great. But I just can't get super like stoked on it. Like, sometimes there's like really cool storylines that end up being really fun to follow. Like, Cocodona 250 this year, where Mike was like 60 miles back from the lead, and I didn't even scroll that far down on the tracker to see. I just assumed he had dropped, and then later in the day I checked it, and he kept climbing, and then it starts to be like, man, is this guy gonna do it? Is he gonna come back from like 60 miles back? And that was pretty exciting to watch. Like, even though it took like 3 days or whatever to unfold, you know.
It did.
But yeah, I don't really follow that much.
Yeah, I think that the more technology that we get, the more funding that we get, the more widespread the sport becomes, I think it will be more interesting and more fun.
Yeah.
Aravaipa Running did a phenomenal job live streaming that race, and I think that event alone, I think, has grown the sport a lot. Mm-hmm. Just everyone knowing that story and be able to follow it. I mean, the comeback story was phenomenal, but you go back 15 years, and if that was, you know, Scott Jurek or Carl Meltzer, like, nobody would have heard about it.
Yeah.
Nobody. But this one, everyone heard about it, was able to watch it live stream on YouTube, listen to the commentators, follow the tracking. That's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting, especially for people in the sport. I know a lot of people outside the sport that like started like tuning in,
Yeah.
and that's truly what the sport needs to really gain momentum. So kudos to them and to those trying to really move the sport and drive it. And I think it's what we need. It's truly what we need to compensate athletes to get more, drive more revenue, so that the sport continues to grow.
Yeah, for sure.
So okay, I'm going to close with my final three questions. So
Okay.
as an ultra athlete, answer the following three questions. As an ultra athlete, what things do we need to stop doing as ultra athletes? Name one thing we should stop doing.
Man, I would say stop posting every run on social media. Turn off your phone. Go run for 4 hours without any technology. Don't take any photos. Stop. Look at the scenery. But you don't need to turn every training run into a photo shoot. Just enjoy it a little bit.
I love that. I love that. Okay. Name one thing as ultra runners that we should start doing.
Man, I hadn't thought about any of these at all. You might have to cut out some silence here as I think about this.
He will.
Okay. I would say man, you got me with this one.
So if you think about the ultra community or ultra
Yeah.
runners, like, what do we need to start doing? Is it like coming together as a community, trail work, involving, uh, creating new races, making races more fair entry? I mean, people have all kinds of answers. Like, what are things that we can start doing in ultra running that is like, this would help the sport?
Well, it's hard to say because I want to say that we need to be more inclusive, but I think that that's so present in everybody's minds that everybody's really trying to do that. So geez, you really
Okay,
stumped
I'm
me
going to
with
give you a
this
new
one.
I'm going to give you a new one.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back to this
Okay.
one. As ultra athlete, what's one thing that we're doing today in the sport that we need to continue doing? We want to make sure this keeps happening in our sport.
I think just thinking about how to make the sport more inclusive and how to constantly be providing more opportunities for people to be involved. Like, I think there's a dangerous thing that's happening right now in society in general that anytime we try to look forward to something, people start to feel slighted. Like, why do we need to give this person more of an opportunity than I have? Like, I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps or whatever. But like, the problem with that thinking is that we're looking at our own opportunities that we've had, and we're looking at it through the wrong lens, right? Like, I can afford to buy 15 pairs of running shoes every year. Not everybody can afford that, and that's kind of a necessary piece of equipment for our sport. There's like a certain barrier to entry to trail running, and I don't think that having those things as a forethought in our discussions about the community should be taken as like a slight to other people that have had to overcome their own obstacles to get there, So I think we just need to look at it from a growth standpoint and how we can get the most people involved. So I think for the most part, we're like on the right track there. You see a lot of things with like where Hard Rock was trying to change the lottery to get more people involved. And I don't want to name any names, but there's certain people out there that like kind of tried to make a mockery of that a little bit. And it's like, why are we mocking somebody trying to do something good? Like, even if you don't think it's necessary, like this race organization does. And so like, just deal with it, like,
yeah, play by their rules, and they're trying to just make it more fair and inclusive, pro rata based off male and female applicants.
Right.
So they want that ratio in each of the 4 pools where they draw a lottery from.
Yeah.
I think it's great. So we want to continue to try to grow the sport inclusive of others, and allow others to join and have it be as fair as possible and inclusive. Sure. So the final question will be, starting tomorrow, if you could start one thing tomorrow as an ultra athlete in the sport, what's one thing you would want to start doing tomorrow as an ultra athlete?
I think for myself, I just want to give myself more forgiveness and leeway and not be so harsh and judgmental as to what I'm doing. I think that's something that I've struggled with in the past is just, being too hard on myself to the point where I'll run myself into the ground, and I'll run races injured with a stress fracture or something because I feel like I have something to prove. So I think if there's a stigma that we need to change in the sport, that everything needs to be hard all the time, because it really doesn't. That's all I think.
Awesome. So, love it. Yeah. Okay. If you don't know, 2 years ago, I published a book called Trial Running. Kind of tells my story about my 10-year fight with the federal government and going through trial and prison and all that stuff. And the other chapter is my experience of the I'm Tough 100 and how to endure through a 100-miler. So it's this alternating book where it kind of goes back 10 years and talks about everything I went through and why running became so important, and kind of this analogy of getting through hard things and using running as this next aid station mentality. And you are in the book, my friend, so as you know, but we have a copy of the book for you for coming on the show today.
Awesome.
And we'll get that book to you, and I appreciate you coming on. And next time, I'll do a better job trying to get Jeff Probst on from Survivor. Would love to have him on the show. Maybe better luck next time getting Jeff Probst on. But this has been the Next Aid Station Podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.